And hello and welcome. In just a moment, the people all around me will be the ones in charge. They've got questions to ask, opinions to voice, and safe to say they are not alone. This weekend, tens of millions of Americans tuned in and saw NFL players taking a knee during the national anthem, or linking arms and doing it before the anthem, or simply staying in the locker room during pregame ceremonies as the Pittsburgh Steelers and Seattle Seahawks did. This was not the first such demonstration, which began as a way of calling attention to racial injustice. It was, however, the biggest, most coordinated, the widest-reaching public protest in a very long time, in part because the president has made it so, and he stayed after it today. As you heard just a second ago in our open, the president said that if the NFL doesn't change, then its business is, quote, going to go to hell. Tonight, a conversation. Social activists, current and former football players, veterans, citizens. Joining us, among others, and taking your questions, Director Spike Lee, former Pittsburgh Steeler great Hines Ward, former Green Bay and football player Nate Boyer, and former Jet Reverend Michael Faulkner. We invited the White House to send a representative. They declined. We still hope to bring you all sides of the debate with, of course, plenty of input from our audience members. But we do want to start with one of the key voices in the conversation, and that's with Malcolm Jenkins. He's a Philadelphia Eagles safety, longtime protester off the field. He serves the community. His nonprofit, the Malcolm Jenkins Foundation, provides scholarships, food, essential resources, and sports programs in Philadelphia and around the country. Malcolm, thanks so much for being with us. I appreciate it. This is not a new protest. You've been, since last season, you've been raising a fist during the national anthem, and I wondered if you could just explain why.
Well, you know, one thing that I think has been missing over this entire year is us getting to the real issues. And I think it started when last summer you had the shooting of Philando Castile and Alton Sterling. And as a black man in America with a platform, you know, I no longer wanted to stand behind social media while we posted hashtag after hashtag of, you know, black people dying at the hands unnecessarily of law enforcement. And so the first thing I wanted to do was get an understanding of how I could play a role in becoming part of the solution. And the way I did that was sitting down with local police officers and finding out what some of their struggles were, their issues were, their training, did they need resources? And through those conversations, we began to work on some dialogue and how we could better that relationship. And soon thereafter, you had the protest of Colin Kaepernick. And I think what that did was that it showed athletes who were already doing this work behind the scenes that we could bring this stuff to the forefront and really change the dialogue nationally about these issues and draw attention to what's happening in our communities.
And Malcolm, to those who say, you know, taking a knee during the national anthem or not coming out during the national anthem is disrespectful, it's unpatriotic, disrespectful to the flag, what do you say?
I understand where that could come from and why they would feel that way. But I think you have to check the track record of a lot of the players that are demonstrating and the NFL in general. I think we do a great job of honoring, you know, our military, our flag through our events. What we do, we have first responders, military, and police at almost every NFL game that we honor and hold up high. But this is not about them. It's not about the flag at all. This is us as concerned citizens trying to play our role in a bigger conversation about race in America, a bigger conversation about our criminal justice system and our law enforcement. And this is not an indictment against law enforcement or police. We're not anti-police. Many of us have worked hand in hand with law enforcement to figure out ways to really move us forward in a better direction, to reinstill trust in our law enforcement, and to really hold that accountability and transparency that our communities are looking for.
When you heard the president in Alabama on Friday say that those taking the field, players taking the field, are sons of bitches, I'm wondering personally what that meant to you. And also now the president is saying that those who do take a knee or protest should be fired.
Well, I think it just, you know, for me personally, it didn't bother me much because I know who I am and I know the work that I've done. And it just shows that, you know, our president does not know much about the guys who are behind those helmets and behind those face masks. You've got players like Anquan Bolden, Torrey Smith, Chris Long, Michael Bennett, Devin McCourty, Johnson Batamosi, Glover Quinn, Kenny Stills, and the list goes on and on. These are guys who are not only proclaiming and being activists, verbally and with their platform, but they're behind the scenes doing work in their communities and doing great work and being inclusive and speaking and trying to do their best to make this America great. And so for him to make those comments just shows that there's a lack of understanding of who we are as players, what we do. And hopefully we can continue to showcase that and really use our platform for the betterment of our country and our communities.
Do you worry about the debate the way it has been the last couple of days and all the attention on, are players going to take the knee? Are they linking arms? Are they staying? That the original intent, that the original concern about, social justice, about racial inequality, that is being lost in this?
I think so. There's definitely a need to refocus, this conversation on what it was originally, and that is, we need accountability for our law enforcement and transparency to build trust in our, our communities can trust law enforcement once again, and our law enforcement can do their job safely and effectively. We don't like to talk about some of these issues. The fact that black people are, 5 times more likely to be shot and killed by an officer than white people. That's something that's tough for us to swallow. And it's not only the people being killed, because that's a small percentage of police interactions with the community, but there's also the treatment of black people at the hands of officers that needs to be addressed, and these implicit biases that we all have that play a big role in how people are treated, and the criminal justice system that we have that's broken, quite frankly broken, and oftentimes affects communities of color more than everybody else, and is detrimental not only to the individual but their home and their communities. We talk about our bail system and the fact that you have 450,000 people every night in jail, not because they've been convicted of any crime, but because they can't afford bail and get out. And it's costing us $40 or $38 million a day to keep people in jail, when we could be using that money to better our schools, to rehabilitate people and give people opportunity. Our reentry programs, when people do get caught up in this system, when they're trying to come back out into society, they're hit with a bunch of roadblocks. You talk about, people with records are the only people that it is legal to discriminate against. And 1 in 3 people in America have a criminal record or arrest record. And so you're talking about lack of resources when it comes to housing, education, loans, voting, all of these things that you lose. But yet we tell these people, we send them back into these communities and tell them to be productive. We tell them to do the right thing, but they've lost all kind of opportunity. And so it's time for us to focus on those issues and steer away from debating on what's right and what's wrong.
I am wondering, though, what happens next weekend? What happens the weekend after that? Does this continue? Does it continue like it was this past weekend?
Well, I think players will continue to do it because, one thing I hear a lot is from fans is, find a better way to do it. And I've asked for an entire year, please show me a better platform and show me a better way that won't allow us to ignore these issues, longer. And because we've done this silently before and it is gone uncovered. But this platform has given us an opportunity to keep these conversations at the forefront. And I've met with many politicians, and criminal justice reform is a bipartisan, has bipartisan support. And so it's not about which side you're on. Everyone knows we need to do this, but it's not big enough or high enough on the agenda. And so as an athlete with the platform, I feel like this is an opportunity to continue to push that and draw awareness to it. So I see them continuing until we see some real significant.
Oh, problem with the satellite, just that last sentence. Malcolm Jenkins, I appreciate your time, and we look forward to talking to you in the future. Thanks so much, Malcolm. I want to introduce everybody in the panel. We got Spike Lee here, Hines Ward, Nate Boyer, and the Reverend Michael Faulker. Reverend, you heard what Malcolm said. You think it is disrespectful to the flag, is that correct?
At that moment, when the flag is raised, it should be saluted. That's my, listen, I'm a Baptist minister. When somebody's praying at the pulpit, you can't walk in. There's certain rules in the house. You know, in our church, you know, men take off their hats. It's that kind of thing. Is there a cause for protest? Absolutely. I get it. I agree with so much of what Malcolm is saying, but
that's not the time or the place.
But that's not the time or the place to me. I mean, that's my statement is, you know, when those colors are raised, I'm going to salute. That does not mean that I believe America is perfect, but I believe the ideal of America is worth continuing to work for.
Spike,
yeah, but that means you're unpatriotic? I'm asking you a question. Does that mean that that these brothers?
No.
When they take in there, are you saying they're unpatriotic?
No.
All right.
I didn't say that.
Okay, I'm asking.
But Spike, to those who say, look, this is not the time or place, and a lot of fans of the game say that, look, I don't want to turn on the game, and this is not the right time.
Politics and sports have always been intertwined, and you can't. We live in the United States of America. Race is a part of the DNA of this country. This country, the foundation of the United States of America was the genocide of Native Americans and slavery. That's the foundation of this country that cannot be disputed, and so that's the foundation. Everything else comes from that.
But
Well,
I can politics and sports. I mean, it's very hard to juggle that because in our world, the football world, we don't see color. We see teammates, you know, come from all different places all over.
But can I just say something?
Go ahead.
What did it take for Bear Bryant to get a black player at Alabama? They played USC,
Yes, I've seen.
and
the
he
movie.
said, we
Yes.
need to get some niggas.
Yes.
So how can you say sports and how can you say football is not?
No, I said politics is because you got to look at it. In our world, that's where the league is trying to do, trying to figure out where's the fine balance.
But can I
trying
just say
to-
this, Hines? In all respect, my brother, the players are different from management and the owners, and they're the people that are running things.
Yes, but then there's two sides, though.
Okay, I
There's two sides, right? There's one side that's trying to say social injustice and trying to make equality for this. And then there's a side that they look at the flag and whatever that flag represents to you, so be it. But then there's a lot of people that really just want to play football. They don't want to have to pick sides. They just want to play football, the game that they love doing as a child, the game that they make a lot of money to provide for their families, to you know, from where they come from. A lot of those players are frustrated because they feel like they have to choose.
Nate, I want to ask you, you're a former Green Beret, served from 2005 to 2015, am I right?
Yes.
You wrote a public letter to Colin Kaepernick, and he actually responded, and you communicated with him, correct?
Right, yeah.
And so he originally was sitting during the national anthem. That upset you. I'm wondering just what you said to him, because a lot of people point to you as the person who suggested that he take a knee rather than sit.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't necessarily the gesture itself. It was just, that was the first person, you know, I guess publicly protesting the anthem that I recognized, that I noticed. And I'm a Niner fan, I was a Kaepernick fan, and it just really hurt me because of what that flag and anthem means to me, you know, my personal relationship with it. You know, that flag comes home and it's draped over coffins of our fallen brothers and sisters, and it's folded and handed to, you know, a spouse or a child of somebody. So for me, it just means something a little bit different. And so I was hurt. Initially, I was angry. And but I was looking at our country right now and where we're at, and just the shouting and everyone's so concerned with just being right and not listening to the other side, even when the other side seems crazy. Because when we're overseas, when we're in Afghanistan and Iraq, I don't agree with most of the customs and cultures, but I have to put that aside and swallow my pride and have a little humility and just say, you know what? I don't know what it's like to grow up where you grow up. You know what I mean? I just know my experience. And so I try to take that into account in that situation, because I don't know anything. I don't know what it's like to be anybody but Nate Boyer. And I never will, no matter what color or anything. And so for me, I just wanted to come with an open mind and just listen for once, because I have a bad habit of judging. I think everybody does. And I wanted to stop that in myself. And that's where that letter came from. And, you know, he reached out and we were able to sit down together for a couple hours before the last preseason game last year. And it was really cool to hear him just listen to and be very open-minded too, and just like, look, he's like, I don't want to hurt you. I don't want to hurt your brothers and sisters. I showed him text messages of friends of mine. Some of them were saying I was a disgrace to the Green Beret because I was even meeting with them, and some of them were like, "I'm with you, man, but you know, that really hurts me to see that, you know." And so I talked to him and I said, I think a knee. We both said it was mutual. I think me, him, and Eric Reed. I think maybe taking a knee would be a little more respectful. It's still a demonstration. You're still saying something, but you know, people take a knee to pray.
Right.
You know, and so for me, it was like it was a common ground at least to start from.
It's not, just to be clear though, it's not something you advocate or support, but you felt taking the knee was better than sitting on a bench.
I want Colin Kaepernick and every American to stand because they want to stand, but I want them all to stand. And I'm more interested if someone's taking a knee because they really care about something than the guy in the stands or the girl in the stands or whoever that feels obligated to stand up when the anthem's played. Because that's how I used to be before I served, and I didn't care. You know what I mean? It was like, oh, you got to take your hat off. Oh, you know, song's playing. You know, when is it over? I just want to hear her play ball and get going. You know what I mean?
Reverend, to those, you know, Spike brought up the point that there's a long tradition of protest in sports. I mean, Muhammad Ali, who, you know, now if you poll this room, everyone say he's a great man. He was vilified, hated, you know, hated. for refusing to serve in the Vietnam War.
And he was called un-American.
He was.
But
see, as Americans, it's part of our responsibility. Talk about the DNA of America. The DNA of America is protest. I mean, the Boston Tea Party is what got this whole thing kicked off. It was a protest movement. But protesting and that flag, we have come so far, and that flag to me represents something sacred. It's not perfect. I know about slavery. I know about the history of racism. I experienced racism in this country, in this day, today, in this day and age. However, as an American, as a Christian, I continue to fight to make it better. That's my job. That's my responsibility. That's what Malcolm was talking about.
You don't think that the players are protesting. You don't think they're trying to do their part to make this country better?
Absolutely. But
they're bringing light to the stuff that no one's talking about.
They really are. But you know what? My part of this conversation is this. I'm saying, okay, now that you've got everybody's attention and you're literally holding the mic, what do we do now? How do we move this conversation forward? Because literally, as a nation, we are all listening. And we've got to say, what next? Malcolm was talking about some great things. Listen, I'm running for office. I'm running for New York City Comptroller. I'm not a politician. I'm a social entrepreneur. I believe in America. I believe in this country. I believe in serving. I left as vice president.
I think the protesters have the same beliefs you have.
Okay, but Spike, we've got to put it in someplace. I mean, listen, you're an artist. You make movies. You tell stories. You tell stories that motivate people, that inspire people, that make people laugh, or make people cry, or make people. I think
this is less about, in my opinion, at least for me, wanting the players to change and do something different. I think it's more about wanting our country to change. And,
exactly.
You know, because I get on, whether it's social media or whatever, it is just, it's some hateful stuff. Yeah. It's awful, and it makes me sick.
Divisive.
When you go fight, you know, for your country and for other people that will never have this, and you're just trying to give them a glimpse of hope, and then you come back and it's just.
I actually got a message from a Navy SEAL who's serving overseas right now, who reached out the other day and just said, "What is going on? Like, you know, what is going on?
You're busy. You're doing something."
No, but I mean, but you're serving with your brothers in arms, and right. There's this unity, and you look back, the country you're representing, and you know, we got to take a break. We're going to continue the conversation, take questions from the audience when our 360 Town Hall continues. Hey, we're back. Before getting to questions from audience members, I just want to read a portion of an open letter written to the NFL by Taya Kyle. She's the widow of Navy SEAL and sniper Chris Kyle. She writes, quote, "Your desire to focus on division and anger has shattered what many people loved most about the sport. You are asking us to abandon what we loved about togetherness and make choices of division. Will we stand with you? Will we stand with our flag?" I want you to meet Vincent and Diana Bonacasa. They're the parents of Staff Sergeant Louis Michael Bonacasa. Sergeant Bonacasa was on his 4th tour in the Middle East when he was killed by a suicide bomber in Afghanistan, along with 5 of his brothers in arms. He left behind his daughter Liliana and his wife Deborah, who's also a veteran. And you have a question, I think, for Spike.
Yes. Last Sunday, our community had a celebration for Gold Star parents. It was a very humbling ceremony, but it brought us back to the day we lost our son. It was a very empty feeling. We came home, turned on the TV, and there was the NFL players on their knees. That was a slap in the face to us. So my question is, how do you support these multimillionaires on their knees and don't support what the fallen heroes died for?
Sir, I'm very sorry for your loss, but the narrative that you spoke about is not true. All these players said many, many times that they respect the armed forces, they respect the flag, and they respect America. And this narrative that when they take a knee is insulting your son who's no longer here is not true. They've said that again and again and again.
But there's a lot of people who, look at this as disrespectful. When you see the
a lot of people thought that in '68 Olympics, this is why I'm wearing this shirt. John Carlos and Tommy Smith, when they won the Olympics, they put the black fist up. A lot of people felt that was.
Excuse me, I have one other question.
Yeah.
When North Korea aims a missile at us, are these football players going to be on their knees, or are they going to support our veterans?
Say it again?
When North Korea aims a nuclear missile at us, are these heroes that you say, NFL, that can't support our flag, are they going to be on their knees when this happens, or are they going to support our veterans?
Sir, I'm worried just as much as Donald Trump as that crazy guy in North Korea. And he has a nuclear code. I'm worried about that.
Reverend,
We're worried about it too.
Huh? Well, we're worrying together then.
Actually, if you could just speak to that. I mean, when you see the flag and you see what these players are doing, is it to you disrespectful to the flag?
It hurts me every time. I will say that. I will say it hurts me. Because I know these guys, I met a lot of these guys personally, I know that it's not their intent to disrespect. I don't see it that way. But that's because I've had those conversations, I think. So as an outsider, I can understand how you would view it that way. And on the veteran side of things, on the veteran issue, I mean, we got 22 veterans taking their own lives a day right now. We have a lot of issues on that, and so that's something that I think needs to be spoken about more and maybe demonstrated in some way. But we could never do something like that during the anthem, right? And I've actually spoken to to players about potentially, mentioning that stuff too. That this is obviously, racism in America absolutely exists. It is an issue. We need to fix it. We're a great country, probably the greatest country, but we could be a hell of a lot greater. And I just think if a lot of those guys would kind of recognize that it's not the only issue, I think more people from that other side, that polarized, opposite, may listen, may open up a little bit.
Brendan Gilmore is here. Brendan tweeted a photo of his grandfather last week that went viral. In the photo, his grandfather, who's a 97-year-old World War II veteran, is taking a knee to support those in the NFL that did the same. Brendan also participated in the counter-protest in Charlottesville. He was a witness to the violence there. He served as a foreign service officer in Africa and the Middle East for 15 years. I think you have a question for Michael. Thanks for being here.
Yes, thank you. My grandfather and I both served, and we love our country, the flag and the anthem. But to us, patriotism is about something deeper. It's about the core values and ideas and aspirations that are enshrined in our Constitution, which has always been a work in progress. Now, my grandfather's action I see as saying, don't use my service to divide us and to distract us from the core issue of addressing systemic racial injustice. So I want to go back to the question that the Reverend had raised about what are the concrete steps we all need to be taking in a unified way, both as individuals and as a country, to make progress on racial justice.
Reverend?
Malcolm talked about a lot of things that he was doing, engaging law enforcement directly. I think it's amazing. When I played with the Jets, we had this program called Goals for Youth, and actually went upstate New York, in rural upstate New York, and worked with migrant workers' children. These kids were so poor. I mean, dirt floor poor. I had never seen poverty. It was like Appalachian poor. I had never seen poverty like this. And I just spent time with each kid, 10 kids a week, and drove around from school to school. The graduation rate was less than 10%, went up to 90%. That's just one thing. I left Liberty University as a vice president to come to New York to run a soup kitchen in Times Square, in the old Times Square. These guys, these athletes are champions. Many of them are champions. They're not just physical, it's a whole emotional thing. I think what we need to do is Hines, we need to be engaging them in positive things that we can do going forward. I'm not just talking about feel-good stuff. I'm talking about stuff to get engaged. And have these folks, have the wealthy folks help fund these things that we're doing. I don't believe government can do this.
Let me, I just want to introduce everybody to Joey Odoms. He was a combat veteran, a former member of Maryland's Army National Guard, and up until yesterday, the singer of the national anthem for the Baltimore Ravens. Joey announced yesterday, after 3 years of singing the Star Spangled Banner, that he was resigning. First of all, thank you for your service. Why did you decide to do that?
I felt like not all of me was welcome. The combat veteran was welcomed. The former 911 operator was welcomed. The person who sang the national anthem was welcomed. But the veteran who also saw that there was a reason for these players to be kneeling was not welcome. So I made this decision, that was not the place for me to be.
See, I think the league is in a unique position because we don't know how to deal with it. I mean, with the remarks of Trump coming out on Friday night, we talk about unity in the NFL, right? And so it seems like every NFL team was trying to figure out how to do it the right way, and they totally just bombed it, right? And the leader of our league, Roger Goodell, he was nowhere to be found. So through Sunday, teams are trying to figure out what's the best way we do. How do we do this after his remarks? You saw Pittsburgh Steelers. How you see how we did it? We totally dropped the ball. Tennessee and Seattle, they didn't want to be a part of it either way. They stayed in the locker room. Other teams stayed out. And then finally on Monday night, and it kills me to say this, hurts me to say this, the Dallas Cowboys, I think, came close to getting it right. Jerry Jones, the owner, kneeled down with his players to show support for the players that was going through the protest. But at the same time, those same players stood for the national anthem.
Spike, I'm wondering what you thought of that.
Yeah, here's the thing.
Maybe you need to be the commissioner.
I got enough hatred already. Here's the thing. I was not buying that stuff, that show with the owners kneeling with the players or the arms locked up. I wasn't buying it because they're forgetting why this whole thing has happened. If they want to stop, if they want to unite with the players, Colin Kaepernick should have a job in NFL. So it's hypocritical for them to say we're all united, but we're forgetting the reason why this whole thing started.
But do you think it's a blackball situation?
Yes.
100% because of his
because people do not like what he does, what he did.
But now the whole league is doing
I think it's a business. I think it's a business decision. I believe that if you own a business, very qualified. You should,
Can I get really quick, not to mess up your flow. There's 32 teams in the league. Are there any teams where he could be the starting quarterback right now?
Okay.
How many?
Yes, but that's not my point. My point is, if you could hire that person and but at the same time, you had that fear, that worry, you may lose a large amount of your clientele, your client base.
I got an answer for you. I got an answer for you. Branch Rickey. Branch Rickey made the decision, we're going to hire Jackie Robinson. Nobody else wanted him. That was the decision. The Brooklyn.
Jackie
No, let me.
Robinson's a Hall of Fame
He
baseball
was Hall
player.
of.
What are you
He
talking
was
about?
Hall of Fame paper before Branch Rickey hired him.
Yeah, but Jackie
He was the
Robinson
first. He was the
one
first
of the
black
most
person in Major
talented-
League Baseball.
Yeah, but you can't compare him to Colin Kaepernick.
No, I'm giving you an example of where somebody made the decision.
Okay, somebody.
But no. Branch Rickey made the decision. Al Carmel says, I'm going to hire, no matter what Carmel says, I'm hiring Jackie Robinson.
Okay, so
that was a business decision.
It was a business
decision.
decision.
That was a business decision.
And guess what? They made lots of money from it. It was risky at first, but here's the thing. Where do we go
which
from
NFL
here?
owner is going to be the Branch Rickey today? That's the question.
Where do we
which
go from here?
NFL owner is going to be the Branch Rickey and give Colin Kaepernick a job?
I want to just introduce.
Colin Kaepernick has got a job.
Where?
He is a leader of a movement. He made a decision to put his career on the line. I salute Colin Kaepernick for his courage.
Why can't he do that and play, though?
Playing football
Why
is
can't
not
he do
the
that
only
and play?
thing in life.
Why can't he do that and play?
Hey, put him in the movies. Make a movie about
No, he's a football player.
Yeah, let's do that.
Nah, that's the okie doke. Nah.
All right. I want to introduce. I want everybody to meet Brandon Rumbaugh. Brandon's a Marine who did combat tours both Iraq and Afghanistan. Corporal Rumbaugh survived an IED attack in Afghanistan. He lost both of his legs. Brandon, obviously, thank you for your service, and thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
I think you have a question for Nate.
Yeah. So, unity. We've used that word a lot tonight, and I think that's something that I learned in both my tours overseas. But what I want to say is, I'd honorably stand next to, all of my fellow Americans during the anthem. That's what I believe, and that's what I do. But after the fact, I would stand next to anybody that wants to peacefully protest for the racial injustice anyone is experiencing. My question is simple. Protesting the national anthem is adding fuel to a fire that was created by a few hateful people who think they are superior because of their white skin color or their job title. How can we as a country use another platform to achieve our goals but not disrespect something so many people, including myself, hold so dear?
It's tough.
Good question.
Action, man. 100%. And that's where we're at now. I mean, everybody's very aware. We're sitting in this room, we're talking about this. I'm not saying protesting to stop now, but I'm saying we're very aware. And there is a lot going on. There's a lot of players doing stuff, but it's not growing yet. And I think it needs to immediately. And I think, speaking of Colin, I love the guy, man. I sat down with him. Where's he at? He should be sitting in this room with us and talking about this, in my opinion, And
He's on the low.
He's on the low.
He's on the low.
But I think part of that is, is he going to be willing to lay down his arms a little bit and say, police chiefs and whoever, and then people in high places, high places. Is he going to be? Would he be able to sit in a room with Donald Trump and have a conversation? That would change a lot in this country if that happens somehow. I don't see it happening, but I would love that. I would love more than anything to see that.
Donald, the man called his mother son of a bitch.
I understand that.
See,
I understand
but
that.
now I think it's.
He called his mother son of a bitch.
But now it's personal. It's not even about the protest. It's everyone's. Hates
You think
Donald
it's
Trump.
now becoming about the president, not
Yes.
not the original issue?
Exactly.
I want everybody to meet Tamisha Moats. She's the wife of former NFL player Ryan Moats. After an incident with law enforcement back in 2008, she and her husband worked with police to try to bring about positive change in the community. Tamisha, you have a question for Hines.
Yes, I do. So basically, our situation with the police happened 8 years ago. Instead of going, public, we decided to go behind the veil. We decided to work with the local police groups. We even reached out multiple times to the officer who was involved in our case. However, the door has constantly been slammed in our face. So at this point, we're 8 years later. It's gotten a lot worse. And I think that this protest is much needed because unlike Colin Kaepernick, we tried to take the higher road and nothing has happened. It's gotten a lot worse. So my question to you guys, and respectfully, Reverend, I heard you say go work with the groups directly. That's not working. It's getting worse in America. Everyone's so divided. We have to come up with a solution. And I do believe that government has to be involved. So I would like to know what is a proper next step and one that's going to come up with a resolution and not just continue to divide the country even further.
Well,
It was to Hines,
okay.
actually.
Well, I mean, I look at it as the NFL has a unique platform. I mean, we own a network. I would love to see guys on a Tuesday on their off day, let's sit down and do a 2-hour special and talk about dialogue of all the things that has happened. Bring a police chief on board to sit there and talk and put it out there so all you guys can view it. If a situation's happened to you that you can kind of relate to, then we're talking about it. I think dialogue solves
don't
everything.
people, when people speak out who are on, I mean, I don't watch sports channels, but when from what I've read, when people, when people, there's like 4 ESPNs, I turn by them really quickly. But when, it seems like sometimes when people speak out about politics in the sports world, they get criticized as, wait a minute, you're a sports person, you're not supposed to be talking about it. I'm not tuning in to
well,
look
I think she and your husband can speak by what happened, you know, the situation, what happened. And if that were to arise with someone else, at least they know somebody who's been through their situation. I think understanding and not knowing, I think that's kind of where we're behind. But putting it out in the forefront and discussing the issue of what happened with you and your husband with this police officer, I think
I'm going to bring up something. You remember when, the Vietnam vets came back, people were booing them, people were even spitting on them and everything. I'm old enough to remember that time. And then it was like after 2001 or something, I forget, I guess when we went to Afghanistan. I'm in airports and I'm seeing, armed troops coming through the airport. People stop, they part, and they clap. I mean, they're clapping, they're cheering. Everybody's thanking them for their service. That's unified. I mean, wherever you were, people would stop. They see somebody in uniform, they would stop, they would cheer, thank you for your service. I saw this go on, I say, wow. Now, this was just spontaneous American stuff. It went viral. Couldn't we, as Americans, have a viral conversation, a viral dialogue about what it means to be on the same, this racial inequality that we face, these racial tensions that we face?
Let's take a quick break. As we think about that, we're going to take more questions from the audience. Michael Bennett and Doug Baldwin of the Seattle Seahawks join us next. Smith's jersey being burned by a fan or loud boos when the crowd, when the Dallas Cowboys decided to kneel before the game. I'm wondering what goes through your mind, because there are many fans who feel that what you and others are doing is disrespectful.
I see it as the truth of what people don't really want to face, the realities of what's going on in America, the realities of what we're talking about. We talk about police brutality. We talk about Colin Kaepernick. We talk about Flint, Michigan. We talk about all these different types of issues that people don't want to hear in sports, and it just goes to show you that people don't want to be vulnerable, nor do they want to be uncomfortable. They want to get away from it no matter what. That would never change. So people have to listen to what we're talking about, and this is just the truth of what we're doing right now.
Doug, when you see that kind of reaction, you hear the president say that things better change in the NFL or the business is going to go to hell. It's not a free speech issue. What do you want the president or others to understand about what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, it's very clear to me that the players that we're exercising our First Amendment right, and I got the opportunity to hear Mr. and Mrs. Bonacasa speak, and I want to say directly to you that nobody appreciates and respects your son's sacrifice more than us. Your son's sacrifice and the sacrifices of many in our country allow us to exercise our First Amendment right, and I think that's vitally important here. And I think that's really what we're trying to get across, is that there's a message that we want to share with the world, and we think there's no better opportunity than the platform that we have, because that's the biggest platform that we have. And so I want that to be clear. It's that it's not a disrespect. We're honoring those who have sacrificed their lives in order for us to use our First Amendment right.
Michael, I know you had a run-in with police in Las Vegas last month. I'm wondering, did something about that incident impact your views on speaking out or demonstrating?
No, it didn't impact my views. What impacted my views is the mass incarceration of African Americans. 35% of the people in jail are African American. Police brutality, that's what influences me. I think Colin Kaepernick has influenced me to keep pushing forward. And those are the issues that we're talking about. We're not talking about the flag. We're not talking about the military. Even after wars, after World War II, African American men came back to feel subhuman when they came back to society. They didn't have the rights and the Jim. They had to face Jim Crow, you know, and still they couldn't vote after they did Vietnam. So it's not about the flag. It's still about the rights that people want. The equality that we see is fit for every single human. I don't feel like I should have a different conversation with my kids than a white American should have with their kids. I should be able to feel safe when my daughter or son goes out in the streets and feel like they're going to come home. And when I get pulled over by the police, I shouldn't feel like I'm going to die. I should feel that I'm interacting with a law enforcement and that they respect me as being a human being.
Doug, I'm wondering, you know, a lot of people tonight have been asking the question or trying to figure out the answer to the question of where does this go? How does this go from, you know, a protest on the field to actual change? I don't expect you to have an answer or anybody to have a particular answer, but I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that and where the protests go. Does it continue, do you think?
Well, first and foremost, I want to go back to something that the Reverend said earlier. He said that the Boston Tea Party got this kicked off. I'm sorry, sir, you're incorrect. It was the Boston Massacre that happened 3 years prior to that, when 9 British police officers, armed police officers, gunned down some unarmed Americans. That's where this got kicked off. And I think that's ironic that we're talking about this topic tonight. You asked me, Hines Ward, you want to see players doing something on Tuesday? I would invite you to come to Seattle and see what we have done every Tuesday on our off day last year since this conversation has been talked about. And you asked me, Anderson Cooper, what can be done? What's the next steps? Well, we've been saying what the next steps are for a very long time. For me and for my teammates, I don't speak for all of us, but for our message that we've been trying to get across, number one, we want more resources for our law enforcement so that they can experience better de-escalation tactics, better policies, better protocols, so that issues and situations like Tamir Rice don't happen. I was a young man, once 12 years old, playing around in my neighborhood, playing cops and robbers, and shot and killed in those situations. Number two, I know that the rebuttal is going to be about you should handle yourself accordingly when you interact with law enforcement. Well, let's put the DARE program back into schools. Let's start funding more education programs. Let's start putting more resources in our public school system in general. So you want to know what's the next steps? That's what we're asking for. And we've been saying that since day one.
And for me too, just to treat it a little better,
Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I want to say...
No, sorry, Michael was just saying something, the Reverend. Okay. Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I wanted to say...
Michael, football player Michael, sorry. Go ahead, Michael.
Sorry. No, sorry. And, you know, I would like to challenge every American that's watching this show to treat people better. That's really what it's about. It's about treating people like human beings. That's the first step. The first step is to recognize and see somebody as an equal being when you recognize them. There's no way that a woman should feel less human than a man. There's no way that a black person should feel less human than a white man. Everybody should be seen equal. And until that happens and everybody see what we're fighting for is the truth and the reality of what we want and less about the flag, then there's never going to be a change. And the change starts with our heart. This is not a violent protest. This is a peaceful protest. We're challenging people spiritually, not physically, spiritually, to change the way that you've been doing, change the culture.
Michael Bennett, Doug Baldwin, guys, thank you so much for being with us. I appreciate it. Back now with the panel, and also we're going to have more questions from the audience. So I'm just wondering, reaction to Hines?
Well, you talked about change. I think change is taught in the homes. It starts with the parents. You know, my mom always taught me to treat others like you want to be treated. You know, if you do that in life, and good things are going to happen. Sometimes I think for a lot of these guys that come in, they grow up in different situations, different environments or whatever. Listen, I understand. I got pulled over a couple times. I had a nice car or whatever, but also I got pulled over by black cops. I had a friend who got shot by a black cop. You know, so to me, in our community, I think we have to do more. And I heard Baldwin saying, it's great what they do on Tuesdays. I think as a league, if we're trying to help everyone in this process, I think, yes, it's not just Seattle Seahawks. I think everyone needs to have a platform.
32 teams, right?
All 32 teams get on something Tuesdays and talk about social equality.
I wonder, you talked about police. I want to bring in Edwin Raymond. He's a sergeant in the New York Police Department. Sergeant Raymond supports Colin Kaepernick and others like him in the NFL. He says he's seen issues between law enforcement and minority communities from the inside, and I think he has a question for Spike. Welcome, and thank you for your service.
Thank you. All right. Based on the dialogue this evening, and it seems as if most people understand that racial inequalities in the U.S. is not an antiquated issue, but there is a significant portion of this population that they seem to think that this is something that was solved during the civil rights movement. So what can we do to get those people to understand that there's still a lot more work to do? Because if we're not having this conversation from that platform, it's almost pointless. How do we get this fact to be universally accepted?
Spike? It's a tough question.
That's a tough one. I think I'd go with my brothers from the Seattle Supersonics. We have to understand that we all... Excuse me!
Everything ain't about basketball. Everything.
The Seahawks! Yeah, I'm still mad about Pete Carroll calling that pass. But we have to understand each other's humanity. I think that's what they were talking about. We had this superiority thing is got us jacked up. And I also think that what Donald Trump has done, I don't want to say his name, he's given a lot of these crazy people the green light who were under the surface and now coming out full-blown with their hate.
But Nate, one of the things you said about the people of Afghanistan, the Afghan government, you may not understand or even like a lot of the stuff you see, but you have to put yourself in their shoes. I think that's such an important thing, even here at home, to walk in someone else's shoes.
Absolutely. I mean, that's something we just really struggle with too as a country. We don't even want to listen. We don't even want to empathize with the other side, and it's always about sides. That's the biggest issue. Right. You know what I mean? It's like you got to be on this team or that team, or nobody likes you. You sit in the radical middle, and you're a freaking outlier, which doesn't make any sense.
I think for the Mishi Marshall is here. She's the wife of New York Giants wide receiver Brandon Marshall. Her grandfather served in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. Mishi has a question for Michael. Welcome.
Hi. Thank you for having me. My question is, NFL athletes as well as other professional athletes are not necessarily seen as individuals. They are representations of teams.